In the sun-scorched borderlands of southern Arizona, a deadly confrontation is about to unfold. When the most brutal faction of the Sinaloa cartel sets their sights on a quiet ranch in Shadow Valley, they believe they're dealing with just another aging American farmer. They couldn't be more wrong. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jack Harrison isn't your typical rancher. For 28 years, he was the most feared Delta Force operative in American military history, leading classified missions that will remain redacted for decades. His call sign was Wraith, a shadow that could infiltrate the most heavily fortified compounds and eliminate high-value targets without leaving a trace. This is not just another border conflict story. This is about how the deadliest cartel faction in North America learned the hard way that some warriors never truly retire. When they came for his land, they didn't realize they were walking into an ambush crafted by a master of unconventional warfare. What follows is the story of how one man and his elite team would dismantle an entire cartel operation in just 72 hours, using nothing but a remote ranch, 3 decades of combat experience, and the tactical genius that made him a living legend. 2. Relentless Arizona sun beat down on Jack Harrison's shoulders as he mended the fence line along his property's eastern border. Dust devils danced across the desert hardpan, twisting between the towering saguaros that stood like ancient sentinels. His Belgian Malinois, Shadow, prowled the perimeter, nose to the ground, always vigilant. At 55, Jack still moved with the calculated precision of a predator, each motion economical, purposeful. His weathered hands might look like those of a simple rancher, but they bore the invisible scars of countless classified operations. Something caught his eye: fresh tire tracks cutting through the desert soil, too deep for local pickup trucks. Shadow's ears perked up, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Jack knelt, examining the impressions with practiced eyes. Heavy vehicles, military-grade tires, definitely not Border Patrol or local law enforcement patterns. Maria Suarez, his neighbor, who ran the local mercantile, pulled up in her battered Ford pickup. The concern on her face told him everything before she spoke. "Jack, have you heard about the Reeves family?" He straightened, brushing red dust from his jeans. "What about them?" "They're gone. Just disappeared overnight. But this morning, I saw men at their ranch, black SUVs, men in tactical gear. They're not from around here. Cartel." Jack's voice was steady, but his mind was already calculating angles, mapping scenarios, formulating strategies. "Los Fantasmas faction." Maria nodded, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "That's what they're saying in town. They've been moving north from Sonora, taking over ranches one by one. Those who don't sell." She left the sentence hanging. Jack's jaw tightened. "Have they approached you yet?" "No, but the Martinez place went last week. Same story. Mysterious buyers, too much money to refuse. Those who stay say they're using the ranches for supply routes." "Makes sense," Jack said, his tactical mind dissecting the pattern. Isolated properties, legitimate cover for vehicle traffic, existing structures for storage, perfect narco-logistics network. Maria leaned out her window, voice dropping to a whisper. "Jack, these aren't ordinary criminals. They're organized, well-trained. Some say they've got former Mexican special forces in their ranks. Sheriff Reynolds is outgunned and nobody else will stand up to them." Jack patted the side of her truck. "Don't worry about me, Maria. I've handled worse. Just be careful. They're targeting this valley systematically. Won't be long before they come knocking on your door." As Maria drove away, Jack whistled for Shadow and headed toward his barn. Inside, beneath the ordinary ranching equipment and hay bales, lay a hidden bunker he'd installed when he first bought the property. Old paranoia, his friends had called it. Jack called it preparation. He lifted the reinforced steel hatch, revealing a cache of equipment he'd hoped never to use again. Military-grade communications gear, weapons, tactical gear, surveillance equipment. Everything he'd need if things went south. He'd spent his entire career planning for worst-case scenarios. This wouldn't be any different. Jack's satellite phone buzzed, a message from an old contact in military intelligence. Los Fantasmas moving hard and fast. 8 properties taken in the last month. Watch your 6. He secured the phone and moved to his office, pulling out detailed topographical maps of the valley. His ranch sat at a crucial choke point, controlling access to a network of unmapped arroyos and ancient Native American trails. No wonder they wanted it. The sound of vehicles on the main road caught his attention. Through his high-powered optics, he watched 3 black SUVs roll past his gate, moving slowly. Too slowly. Reconnaissance, marking the next target. "Shadow," Jack said, scratching his dog's ears. "But they don't know who they're dealing with." He spent the rest of the morning making calls to old teammates, men who'd fought beside him in places that didn't officially exist, carrying out missions that would never see the light of day. "Blackbird, it's Wraith. Remember that favor you owe me. Time to pay up." "Jack? Been a while. How bad is it?" "Los Fantasmas cartels moving into the valley, taking ranches, setting up distribution networks. They'll be here soon." A low whistle from the other end. "Need some backup? Might not hurt to have the old team together again. One last mission." "You know we're not as young as we used to be." Jack smiled grimly. "Neither are they. Call the others. We've got work to do." By afternoon, his plans were in motion. 4 of his old team members were en route. Marcus Blackbird Cole, their long-range specialist, Ray Ghost Torres, demolitions expert, Keith Cypher Chen, communications and cyber warfare specialist, and Doc Sawbones Mitchell, their combat medic. Together, they'd taken down warlords, terrorists, and armies. A cartel faction wouldn't know what hit them. Jack walked his property again as the sun began to set, this time with different eyes. Not as a rancher, but as a combat commander. Every ridge, every wash, every approach could be used to his advantage. The cartel thought they were targeting an old man's ranch. Instead, they were walking into a kill zone designed by one of the most experienced special operations commanders in history. Shadow barked suddenly, alerting Jack to more vehicles approaching. The same SUVs from earlier, this time stopping at his gate. Jack straightened his back, adjusted his worn ranch hat, and prepared to play his role. Let them think he was harmless. Let them underestimate him. It was a mistake they would only make once. 7 men emerged from the SUVs, their tactical gear poorly concealed beneath expensive suits. Jack counted 3 more staying with the vehicles, hands never far from their weapons. Shadow growled softly beside him, but a gentle touch from Jack kept him in check. Alejandro El Coyote. Ramirez led the group, his polished boots raising dust as he approached. His smile was practiced, professional, but his eyes held the cold calculation of a predator. Jack had seen those eyes before, in places where civilization was just a distant memory. "Mr. Harrison," Ramirez extended his hand, "beautiful property you have here." His grip was too firm, trying to establish dominance. "Amateur tactic. What can I do for you, gentlemen?" Jack's voice was friendly, measured, playing the role of a simple rancher while his mind catalogued every detail. 2 men moving toward his barn, trying to be subtle about it. One by the gate with a radio, former military training but sloppy. They'd grown too comfortable. "We represent an investment group," Ramirez said, gesturing to the valley. "We've been acquiring properties in the area, expanding operations, you might say. Your land, it has certain features that interest us." Jack leaned against his fence. Host, the picture of relaxation. Inside, he was marking fields of fire, noting their tactical positions, identifying their weaknesses. Ex-military, at least 4 of them. The others were muscle, used to intimidating civilians. "Not interested in selling," Jack said simply. "Land's been in my family too long." Ramirez's smile tightened. "Perhaps I wasn't clear." We're prepared to offer significantly above market value, 5 million cash, more than generous for a ranch this size. Jack scratched Shadow behind the ears, buying time to observe the two men by his barn. They were checking sightlines, assessing defensive positions, not real estate investors, advanced team mapping the property for an assault. Money's not everything, Jack replied. Some things aren't for sale. The friendly facade cracked slightly. Ramirez stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mr. Harrison, let me be direct. This valley is changing. Progress, you might say. You can be part of that change and profit from it, or... Jack's voice remained calm, even as he noted the subtle shift in the men's positions surrounding him, standard intimidation formation, or you might find this valley becoming very unwelcoming. Accidents happen, especially to stubborn old men who don't know when to take a good deal. Jack straightened slowly, allowing just a hint of steel to enter his voice. Sounds like a threat, Mr. Ramirez. Ramirez's eyes widened slightly at the use of his name, a name Jack shouldn't have known, a calculated slip to let them know he wasn't as ignorant as he appeared. Simply stating facts, Ramirez recovered quickly. The valley is changing. Fighting it would be unwise. One of the men by the barn called out in Spanish, something about security cameras. Jack had let them spot the obvious ones, hiding his real surveillance system much more carefully. Think about it, Ramirez said, producing a business card. You have 24 hours. After that, the offer becomes significantly less generous. Jack took the card, noting the fake company name, Standard Cartel Front Operation. I'll sleep on it. See that you do. Ramirez turned to leave, then paused. Beautiful dog. Belgian Malinois, yes? Would be a shame if something happened to him. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story, Shadow growled, picking up on Jack's tension. Jack kept his hand gentle on the dog's head, but his voice carried the weight of 3 decades of combat experience. That would be a very serious mistake. Something in his tone made Ramirez hesitate. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face for just a moment. The mask slipped, and Jack saw genuine surprise. They had expected an easy mark, a simple rancher. They could bully or buy. Instead, they'd caught a glimpse of something else, something that set off warning bells honed by years of violence. The cartel men retreated to their vehicles, trying to maintain their confident swagger. Jack watched them drive away, already planning his next moves. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. 2 hours out. Team assembled. Jack typed back. Make it 1. Company's already knocking. Inside his house, Jack activated his real security system. Cameras hidden in cacti and rock formations covered every approach. Motion sensors monitored the perimeter. Everything fed into a command center he'd built in his underground bunker, a holdover from years of planning for worst-case scenarios. He pulled up satellite images of the valley, marking known cartel properties. 8 ranches taken in the last month, each one strategic. His land was the missing piece, controlling the main valley access point and providing clear lines of sight for miles. His phone rang again. Maria, her voice tight with worry. Jack, they were at your place, weren't they? I saw the SUVs. Just a friendly business proposition, Jack replied, checking his weapons cache. Nothing to worry about. Don't lie to me. Rodriguez tried to stand up to them last week. Next day, his barn burned down. Day after that, his wife's car crashed on a straight road. No witnesses. Maria, listen carefully. Next few days, stay with your cousin in Tucson. Don't tell anyone you're going. Jack, what are you planning? Better you don't know. Just trust me. After hanging up, Jack descended into his bunker. The hidden room was exactly as he'd left it, weapons and equipment maintained. And ready. He began checking each piece methodically, muscle memory taking over as he field-stripped and reassembled rifles. Shadow whined softly from above. Jack paused, listening. Another vehicle is approaching. Different engine sounds. He checked the cameras. Local sheriff's department. Deputy Carlos Ruiz, young and out of his depth but honest. Jack met him at the gate. Ruiz looked nervous, shuffling his feet. "Mr. Harrison, I heard you had visitors today. Word travels fast. Listen, about the others. Rodriguez, the Martinez family. We know what happened, but we can't prove anything. These people, they're connected. Evidence disappears. Witnesses change their stories." Jack nodded. "And you're here to advise me to take the deal." Ruiz looked ashamed. "They own half the valley already. Fighting them. It's suicide." "Appreciate the warning, Deputy, but I can handle myself." As Ruiz drove away, Jack's phone chimed again. A message from Keith. Intercepted their comms. Full. Assault planned. They're not waiting 24 hours. Jack smiled grimly. "Perfect. Let them come in force. Let them think they had the advantage." 3 decades of combat experience had taught him that overconfident enemies made mistakes. And he'd learned, long ago, how to turn those mistakes into opportunities. He had 1 hour until his team arrived. 1 hour to turn his ranch into a fortress. The cartel thought they were dealing with a stubborn old man. By morning, they'd realize their mistake, but by then, it would be far too late. The sound of engines, echoing through the valley, caught Jack's attention. Through his security feeds, he watched 4 vehicles approaching from different directions. His team using old tactics to avoid being tracked. Marcus's black Ram pickup came first, followed by Ray in a weathered Jeep. Keith and Doc arrived minutes later, their vehicles covered in dust from back road driving. Jack met them in the barn, away from prying eyes. 20 years melted away as his old team assembled, their movements still synchronized after all this time. Marcus carried his custom Barrett rifle case like it was part of him. Ray brought enough. Explosives to level a small city, all carefully concealed in construction equipment cases. Keith's communications gear looked civilian, but could crack military-grade encryption. Doc's medical kit was upgraded but familiar. He'd patched them, up through worse situations than this. "Just like old times," Marcus said, his voice gruff but warm, "though usually we had the government backing us up." "Government would just slow us down," Ray replied, already examining the barn's structure. "Nice setup, Jack. Good sight lines. Multiple escape routes. You weren't kidding about being ready." Jack spread a detailed map across his workbench. Cartel's been systematic, taking key properties, establishing distribution routes. They're not just running drugs. They're setting up a permanent operation. Keith connected his laptop, bringing up intercepted communications. They're professional. Ex-military in their ranks, mostly Mexican special forces, but they're arrogant, sloppy with their security. Their mistake. "How many are we dealing with?" Doc asked, organizing his medical supplies. "Main force is 40 men, Jack pointed to. Marked locations. 2 separate groups. First team's muscles. They handle intimidation, arson, accidents. Second team's their professionals. Actual combat experience, proper tactical training. Marcus examined the terrain through the barn door. Kill zones are perfect. Natural bottleneck. Here, high ground advantage. We can funnel them right where we want them. They'll come in force, Jack warned. No more pretense of being businessmen. They've got heavy weapons, armor, and probably air support. Good. Ray grinned, pulling out his demolition plans. Been a while since we had a proper fight. This isn't just about holding them off. Jack's voice turned serious. We end this permanently. Not just here. We shut down their entire operation in the valley. The team sobered, recognizing the tone. It was the voice that had led them through impossible missions, that had brought them all home alive when the odds said otherwise. Why'd you really come? Jack asked, looking at each man. You could have stayed retired, stayed safe. Doc spoke first, his medical bag open beside him. Remember Kandahar? That village we found after the Taliban went through? Some things you can't walk away from. Some fights need fighting. Cartel took my sister's ranch in Texas, Ray added, checking detonator wires. By the time anyone could do anything, it was too late. Not happening again, not here. Marcus just shrugged, but his eyes were hard. You called. That's enough. Keith looked up from his computer. They're moving faster than we thought. Intercepted orders. Main force mobilizing for tonight. No warning, no negotiation. They're coming. To take the ranch and send a message. Perfect. Jack smiled grimly. Let's give them a message of their own. They spent the next hour fortifying key positions. Ray rigged the main road with explosives that could flip an armored vehicle. Marcus set up 3 different sniper nests, each covering a different approach. Keith established a command center in Jack's bunker, linking their communications and surveillance. Remember Baghdad? Marcus asked as they worked. That night raid that went sideways when the whole neighborhood lit up. Ray chuckled. Never saw so much firepower in my life. Until Jack called an audible, Doc added. Turned their own defenses against them. Still don't know how you knew that would work. Simple, Jack said, checking ammunition stores. People get predictable when they think they have the advantage. Cartels the same way. They're used to civilians, used to easy victories. They won't. Be ready for what's coming. Keith's voice crackled over their earpieces. Movement at the Rodriguez place. They're assembling their force. Thermal imaging shows at least 30 vehicles. They're not subtle anymore, Ray observed, finishing his last explosive trap. Coming in like an army. Good, Jack replied. Means they're scared. Scared men make mistakes. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the valley. Jack stood with his team on the porch, watching the day fade. They were no longer young men, but age had brought something else. Experience, patience, the kind of wisdom that only comes from decades of combat. Marcus, I want you in the South Ridge Tower. Best sight lines, and they won't expect anyone up. There, Ray, rig the barn for remote detonation. Make it look like a tempting target. Keith, keep monitoring their comms. The moment they split their forces, we take advantage. Doc, medical station in the bunker, but be ready to move. This gets hot. We'll need your mobile. Each man nodded, understanding their roles without need for further explanation. This wasn't their first impossible mission, just maybe their last. One more thing, Jack added, his voice carrying the weight of command. We're not just defending a ranch, we're defending every family in this valley, every person these bastards would victimize. We do this right, we do it clean, and we do it permanently. As his team moved to their positions, Jack checked his weapons one final time. Shadow sat beside him, alert and ready. In the distance he could see dust clouds rising, the Cartel's forces assembling. They thought they were preparing to raid an old man's ranch. Instead, they were walking into a trap laid by some of the most experienced combat veterans alive. The radio crackled. Keith's voice was tight. First wave moving out. ETA 15 minutes. Copy that, Jack replied, signaling to his team. Remember, let them get comfortable. Let them think they have the advantage. Then we show them what real soldiers can do. The Arizona sun disappeared behind the mountains, plunging the valley into darkness. But darkness had always been their ally. In the shadows, Jack Harrison wasn't a rancher anymore. He was Wraith again, the ghost that hunted other ghosts. And he was about to remind the Cartel why that name had once struck fear into the hearts of far more dangerous men than them. Moonlight silvered the Arizona landscape as Jack watched the Cartel convoy approach through his night vision scope. 30 vehicles moving in formation. Someone had trained them well. Too bad they'd forgotten the first rule of combat. Never fight on ground your enemy has prepared. They're splitting up, Keith's voice crackled through the comm. 3 teams, main force coming up the central road, 2 flanking units trying to circle wide. Marcus's voice was cold and professional from his sniper's nest. Got eyes on the lead vehicle. Officer types in the back seat. Want me to take the shot? Negative, Jack replied. Let them get comfortable. Spring the trap on my mark. The convoy's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the road to Jack's ranch. They moved with confidence, no attempt at stealth. Why bother? They thought they were hunting an old man. Contact in 2 minutes, Ray reported. Charges are set. These boys are in for a surprise. Jack watched through his scope as the first vehicles reached his outer perimeter. The cartel soldiers emerged with military precision, weapons ready, moving in practiced formations. Ramirez stepped out of an armored SUV, directing his men with hand signals. "Spread out," Ramirez ordered in Spanish. "I want this place surrounded. No one gets out alive." "They're deploying heavy weapons," Keith warned. 50 cals on the trucks, RPGs in the second wave. Jack's voice remained calm. "Stick to the plan. Let them commit." The cartel forces advanced steadily, moving past the first line of Jack's defenses without noticing them. 50 meters, 40, 30, they were almost in position. "Sir," one of Ramirez's men called out. "No movement in the house, thermals showing nothing." Ramirez grabbed his radio. "Check the barn. He has to be here somewhere." 3 cartel soldiers approached the barn, weapons ready. Jack watched them through his scope, counting down in his head. This was the moment that would set the tone. "Now," Jack commanded. Ray detonated his first series of charges. The ground erupted beneath the lead vehicles, sending them airborne in a shower of dirt and metal. Before the dust settled, Marcus opened fire from his hidden position. 2 cartel soldiers dropped before they realized they were under attack. "What the hell?" Ramirez shouted, diving for cover. "Where's the fire coming from?" The night exploded into chaos. Jack's team had prepared kill zones throughout the property, and now they put them to use. Every time the cartel forces tried to rally, they found themselves caught in interlocking fields of fire. 3 trying to flank east, Marcus reported calmly, his rifle cracking in the darkness. "Got them." Ray responded with a series of explosions that drove the flanking team right into Keith's line of fire. Jack moved like a ghost through the darkness, years of combat experience guiding every step. He caught 2 cartel soldiers by surprise, disarming one and using him as a shield against the other's fire. Both went down without a sound. "Who are these guys?" a cartel soldier screamed over their radio. "This isn't right. They're too organized." Ramirez's voice cut through the chaos. "They're professionals. Fall back to the vehicles. Reform defensive positions." "Too late," Jack whispered, triggering another set of charges. The explosions cut off their retreat, trapping the cartel forces in the kill zone. Marcus's rifle spoke again. "Technical at your 3 o'clock, Jack. Gunner down, but driver's still up." Jack rolled behind a tractor as 50 caliber rounds tore through the air where he'd been standing. The technician's driver was good, keeping the vehicle moving to avoid return fire, but he'd forgotten to watch his flanks. "Ray," Jack called, "time to use that toy you brought." A rocket streaked through the darkness, striking the technician's engine block. The vehicle flipped, cartwheeling off the road in a ball of flame. "Damn, I missed that," Ray laughed. "Just like Damascus." "Stay focused," Jack ordered. "They're regrouping." Ramirez had managed to rally his remaining men behind the wreckage of their vehicles. They had training, Jack gave them that. Even caught by surprise, they were adapting quickly. "Zane, what's their strength?" Jack asked, moving to a new position. 22 are still combat effective. They're calling for reinforcements. Second wave is 30 minutes out. "They won't last that long," Marcus stated flatly, his rifle ending. Another cartel soldier's attempt to flank their position. Jack watched Ramirez directing his men, noting their movements. They were trying to establish a base of fire, create space for their reinforcements to arrive. Standard military doctrine. Time to show them why standard responses get you killed. "Ray, hit their rally point. Marcus, watch for runners. Doc, B, ready. Some of them are about to need medical attention." Multiple explosions ripped through the cartel's position. Jack moved through the chaos like a wraith, his suppressed rifle ending threats before they could materialize. 2 decades of fighting had taught him the value of economy of motion. No wasted movements, no hesitation. "Contact front!" "A cartel," soldier screamed. "He's inside our perimeter." Jack's reply was swift and silent. 3 more went down before they could turn to face him. Ramirez was shouting orders, trying to organize a defense against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. "Who are you?" Ramirez screamed into the darkness. "What kind of rancher? Fights like this? The kind you shouldn't have threatened," Jack replied, his voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. The cartel's first assault was falling apart. What had started as a confident attack had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. Of the original 30 vehicles, 12 were burning. Of the 60 men Ramirez had brought, less than half were still fighting. "Pull back," Ramirez ordered. "Full retreat. Get back to the rally point." "I don't think so," Jack said calmly. "Marcus." The sniper rifle cracked 3 times. The remaining vehicle's tires exploded, stranding them in the kill zone. "El Fantasma is going to kill us all," Ramirez muttered, realizing the trap they were in. "El Fantasma should have done his homework," Jack replied, stepping out of the shadows behind Ramirez. "Should have asked why no one had ever successfully attacked this ranch." Ramirez spun, raising his weapon, but he was too slow. Jack's strike was precise, efficient. The cartel leader dropped unconscious as his remaining men surrendered. "Area secure," Marcus reported. "No runners. Doc, we've got wounded." "Nash, what's the status of their reinforcements?" "Still inbound, 20 minutes out. Bigger force this time." "Looks like they're bringing everything they have." Jack nodded, zip-tying Ramirez's unconscious form. "Good. Let them come. First wave was just to remind us of what we can do. Next wave is where we show them who we really are." The team gathered, briefly checking weapons and reloading. The night was still young, and this was just the beginning. The real battle was still to come, but now they were warmed up, synchronized, ready. "Just like old times," Doc said, treating a wounded cartel soldier. "Better," Jack replied, checking his ammunition. "This time we're fighting on our terms, on our ground, and this time we're finishing it for good." The aftermath of the first battle left Jack's ranch eerily quiet. Burning vehicles cast orange glows across the desert night, while zip-tied cartel soldiers sat under Doc's watchful eye. Ramirez was starting to stir, his face showing the dawning realization of just how badly they'd miscalculated. 28 prisoners, Doc reported, finishing another field dressing. 5 critical but stable, rest or walking wounded. Jack knelt beside Ramirez, who glared up at him with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Now then, let's talk about El Fantasma." "Go to hell," Ramirez spat, then switched to Spanish, cursing. "Your choice," Jack replied in perfect Spanish, shocking Ramirez into silence. "But your reinforcements are coming into my kill zone in less than 15 minutes. Would be a shame if they made the same mistakes you did." Keith approached, laptop in hand. "Intercepted their communications. El Fantasma is coming personally. He's pissed, bringing in heavy weapons, professional contractors. This isn't going to be like the first wave." Ramirez laughed, a harsh sound. "You're all dead. El Fantasma doesn't leave witnesses. He'll burn this whole valley to get to you." "How many?" Jack asked calmly. "Enough to kill you 10 times over. Former Mexican Special Forces, Colombian mercenaries, Cartel's best killers. They'll—" Jack cut him off. "No. How many families have you terrorized? How many ranches have you taken? How many accidents have you arranged?" The question caught Ramirez off guard. For just a moment his arrogance cracked, showing uncertainty beneath. "Marcus," Jack called. "What do you see?" The sniper's voice crackled over their comms. "Multiple vehicles, different approach vectors. They're being smart this time. Thermal shows at least 50 troops, maybe more. Multiple heavy weapons teams, they're spreading out." Ray added, "Won't fall for the same trap twice." Jack turned back to Ramirez. "Last chance. Help us end this with minimal bloodshed, or watch more of your men die needlessly." "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Ramirez said, his voice dropping. "El Fantasma, he's different. He enjoys the violence, the killing. You should run while you can." "Already met men like him," Jack replied, standing. "In places much worse than this. They're all the same in the end." Keith's voice cut through the night. First elements reaching the outer perimeter. They're moving slower, checking for traps. Jack moved to his team, their faces illuminated by burning wreckage. They'll come from multiple directions this time, looking to overwhelm us with numbers and firepower. Marcus, I want you mobile. Change positions after every few shots. Ray, time for the secondary charges. Keith, keep their comms scrambled. Doc, I know. The medic nodded toward the prisoners. Keep them secure, keep them alive. Remember, Jack added, they're expecting us to be tired, maybe wounded. They think the first fight cost us. Let them think that. Let them get overconfident. A new voice cut through their radio frequencies, deep, commanding, speaking Spanish with a Sinaloan accent. El Fantasma himself, directing his forces. Found their command channel, Keith reported. Want me to jam it? No, Jack smiled grimly. Let them talk. Fear works better when they can share it. The teams split up, moving to predetermined positions. Years of working together meant they barely needed words. Each man knew his role, trusted the others to play theirs. Through his night vision, Jack watched the Cartel's second wave advancing. Their movement was more professional now, leapfrogging, between cover, maintaining proper intervals. El Fantasma had indeed brought his best. Contact in 2 minutes, Marcus reported. Got eyes on their command element. El Fantasma in the black Suburban, 3 vehicles back, heavily guarded. Ray, Jack directed, give them something to think about. A series of explosions ripped through the night, not aimed at the Cartel forces, but illuminating the battlefield. In the sudden light, they could see what they were walking into. Defensive positions covering every approach, kill zones arranged with mathematical precision. Mother of God, one of the Cartel soldiers whispered over their open channel. The whole property's fortified. Keep advancing, El Fantasma's voice commanded. They're just trying to scare us. Press the attack. Jack's voice cut into their frequency, speaking calm Spanish. 43 minutes ago, I had twice your number in body bags or zip ties. That was when I was being gentle. Last warning, withdraw or meet the same fate. El Fantasma's assault hit like a thunderstorm. Automatic weapons fire lit up the night, heavy caliber rounds tearing through Jack's outer defenses. His forces moved, with professional precision, using suppressing fire to cover their advance. This wasn't the sloppy attack of the first wave. This was a coordinated military operation. Multiple teams, 9 o'clock, Marcus reported, his rifle responding with measured shots. They're using proper fire and maneuver. These aren't Cartel thugs. Jack watched through his thermal scope as El Fantasma's men established support positions. Former Mexican Special Forces, he confirmed. See how they move. They've done this before. A rocket streaked through the darkness, exploding against Jack's barn. The structure held, reinforced exactly for this scenario, but the message was clear. The Cartel wasn't playing anymore. They're probing our defenses, Ray called out. Looking for weak points. Want me to discourage them? Not yet, Jack replied. Let them commit more force. El Fantasma's voice boomed across the battlefield. You cannot hide forever. We will burn everything you have. Jack's response was a precisely placed shot that shattered the Cartel boss's spotlight. Darkness reclaimed the battlefield. Darkness that Jack's team had prepared for, had trained in for decades. 3-man team trying to flank east, Marcus reported. I see them. Ray, give them something to think about. A series of charges detonated. Not to kill, but to herd. The flanking team found themselves pushed right into Keith's field of fire. His suppressed MP5 spoke 3 times. 3 bodies hit the ground. They're coordinating better now, Keith warned. Multiple channels, encrypted comms. These guys are professionals. Jack moved like a shadow through his property, every step calculated. 2 Cartel soldiers were setting up a machine gun nest. Good position, good fields of fire. They never saw him coming. The first went down to a throat strike, the second to a precision takedown he'd learned in advanced hand-to-hand combat. Command. Vehicle moving, Marcus called out. El Fantasma repositioning, strong security detail. Let him, Jack replied. He's looking for a pattern. Let's give him one. The battle shifted into a new phase. El Fantasma's men were good. They'd clearly fought in urban combat before, but Jack's team had written the book on this kind of warfare. Every time the cartel forces thought they'd found an advantage, it turned into a trap. RPG team at your... 2 o'clock, Keith shouted. Jack rolled behind cover as rockets screamed overhead. The explosions were massive, professional-grade weapons. These weren't street thugs with black market gear. This was military hardware. Marcus, priority target. Take out those RPGs. Bit busy, the sniper grunted. Got 3 teams trying to flank my position. Ray, on it. More explosions lit up the night. The RPG team disappeared in a controlled blast that sent their weapons flying but left them alive. Precision demolitions work that only decades of experience could achieve. El Fantasma was getting frustrated. His men were dying or being captured, yet they couldn't seem to get a solid fix on their opponents. Every advance met resistance from unexpected angles. Every tactical advantage evaporated before they could exploit it. "Push forward," he commanded. "There are only 5 men. We have the numbers." "Numbers don't mean much against ghosts." Jack's voice cut through their command channel. "How many men are you willing to lose tonight?" A burst of automatic fire answered. Him. Jack didn't flinch. He'd already moved from that position, anticipating the response. 2 more cartel soldiers went down to precise shots from his suppressed rifle. "The west sector's getting heavy," Doc reported. "They're making a serious push." "That's their feint," Jack replied. "Marcus, watch the east. That's where their real attack's coming." Sure enough, while one team pushed aggressively from the west, their best operators were moving quietly through the eastern approach. It was a solid tactic, one that would have worked against most opponents. "Count 12, Marcus said quietly. "Elite team moving like professionals. These are their best." "Good," Jack replied. "Ray, Doc, shift east. Marcus, hold your fire until my mark. Let's show them what real professionals can do." The elite cartel team moved with impressive skill, using every bit of cover, maintaining perfect spacing. They were halfway to their objective when Jack sprung his trap. Ray's charges illuminated the night, not damaging but disorienting. Before the cartel operators could adjust their night vision, Marcus opened fire from his elevated position. Every shot found its mark, not killing but disabling, taking out knees and shoulders with surgical precision. "Clear them up," Jack ordered, and Doc moved in with swift efficiency, securing the wounded operators. El Fantasma's voice was tight, with barely controlled rage. "Who are you people?" "You really should have done your research," Jack replied calmly. "Asked around about who owned this ranch, about why no one had ever successfully attacked it." A new sound cut through the night. Helicopter rotors. "Boss, they're bringing in air support," Keith warned. "Right on schedule," Jack smiled. "Ray, oh yeah, got something special for choppers. Just say when." The helicopter swept in low, its spotlight. Cutting through the darkness, the door gunner opened up with a minigun, stitching a line of destruction across Jack's property. But the team had prepared for this too. "Now," Jack commanded. Ray triggered a specialized charge, not an explosion, but a massive flashbang designed specifically for aircraft. The helicopter pilot, momentarily blinded, yanked the stick back. The sudden move threw off the gunner's aim. "Marcus!" The sniper's rifle cracked once. The spotlight exploded, plunging the helicopter back into darkness. 2 more precise shots. "Disabled the minigun. You can land safely," Jack broadcast to the pilot, "or you can crash. Your choice." The helicopter retreated, its pilot choosing wisdom over valor. On the ground, El Fantasma was shouting orders with increasing desperation. His elite team was down, his air support driven off, and his men were losing cohesion. "How many more men are you willing to sacrifice?" Jack asked over their channel. "How many bodies before you realize you've made a mistake?" The response was immediate and brutal, a massive barrage of automatic weapons fire, but Jack had already moved, ghosting, through the darkness to a new position. 20 years ago, they'd called him Wraith because he could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and vanish before the enemy could respond. Tonight, he was reminding them why. El Fantasma's voice cut through the chaos with cold fury. Burn everything. Burn it all to the ground. His men deployed incendiary weapons, trying to deny Jack's team their carefully prepared positions. The night lit up with phosphorus and thermite, turning the battlefield into a hellscape of fire and smoke. "They're getting desperate," Marcus observed, relocating as flames consumed his previous sniper nest. "Making mistakes." "Careful," Jack warned. "Desperate men are unpredictable." "Keith, what are you seeing?" "They're splitting into 3 groups. Main force is still pushing towards the center, but they're deploying their best units wide, trying to flank through the burning zones." A massive explosion rocked the ranch house as the cartel deployed satchel charges against the outer walls. The reinforced structure held, but the message was clear. They were done probing and ready to destroy everything. "Sir," Doc called out, "we've got to evacuate. These fires are getting too close to the holding area." Jack processed the tactical situation in seconds. "Marcus, cover the east approach. Ray, buy us some time. Everyone else falls back to position 3. We're not losing anyone tonight." "Got something special saved for this." Ray's voice was grim. "Might want to cover your eyes." Multiple explosions, chained across the property, but these were different. Magnesium bright, creating walls of light that temporarily blinded anyone looking in their direction. In the confusion, Jack's team executed a fighting withdrawal, moving their prisoners and wounded to a fortified storm cellar they'd prepared for exactly this scenario. "They're pushing hard on the west side," Marcus reported, his rifle cracking steadily. "These guys are different. Cartel's elite death squad. I recognize their tactics from the briefings." "Los Fantasmas," Jack confirmed. "El Fantasma's personal, a kill team, ex-Mexican special forces who went rogue." "They're good." "Not good enough," Marcus replied, punctuating his words with precise shots. The death squad moved with fluid grace, using the fires as cover. They were well equipped. Thermal imaging, advanced body armor, military-grade weapons. These weren't cartel thugs. These were professional killers. "Contact!" Keith shouted. 3 death squad members have breached the inner perimeter, moving with lethal precision toward the command center. Jack moved to intercept, but they had him pinned with well-coordinated fire. "Little help here," Jack called out, surprisingly calm despite the bullets cutting through the air around him. "Working on it," Ray replied. The ground erupted beneath the death squad, not with explosives but with compressed air and dirt, a non-lethal but disorienting blast that broke their formation. Jack capitalized instantly, closing the distance. The fight was brief but brutal. The death squad members were excellent shots, but Jack had spent decades mastering close-quarter combat. The first went down to a throat-strike-knife disarm combination. The second managed to land a solid hit before Jack's elbow strike found the sweet spot behind his ear. The third proved tougher, clearly their hand-to-hand specialist. "Impressive," the man said in accented English, squaring up with a fighter's stance. "But you're still just an old man." Jack's response was a lightning-fast combination that ended with the specialist unconscious on the ground. "Age and treachery, kid." "We've got a problem," Keith cut in. "They're bringing up something big. Thermals showing... Oh, hell, they've got a technique with a heavy autocannon. The sound of the 20mm cannon split the night, its rounds powerful enough to punch through Jack's reinforced walls. This wasn't about taking the ranch anymore. This was about complete destruction. Marcus, can you get a shot?" "Negative. They've got it too well protected. Need a new angle." Jack thought fast. The cannon was devastating, but it had weaknesses. "Ray, remember Serbia, that arms deeper with the tanks? Yeah, that was... Oh, I like where this is going." "Can you do it?" Just like old times, boss. Give me 2 minutes. El Fantasma's voice boomed across their comms. You see, this is what happens to those who resist. We will reduce this place to ash. The autocannon continued its devastating barrage, but Jack had fought against worse. Keith, patch me into their frequency. Time to explain something to our friend. Channels open. Jack's voice was cold and professional. That's an impressive gun. Russian-made, probably stolen from a military depot. Very effective against buildings. Not so great against what's coming. You're finished, El Fantasma shouted. Look to your left, the cartel boss did, just in time to see Ray's surprise. The old barn, which they thought was just burning, suddenly revealed its secret. The entire structure had been rigged as a massive directional blast, focusing its force right at the technical. The explosion wasn't meant to destroy. That would have been too dangerous. Instead, it created a massive pressure wave that overturned the vehicle, rendering the cannon useless and sending El Fantasma's men scrambling for cover. That was our excuse to keep things civil, Jack announced. Push any harder and we stop being nice. Kill them all, El Fantasma screamed, but there was an edge of fear in his voice now. His men were dying or surrendering. His best units were down, and his heavy weapons were being systematically eliminated. Boss, Doc called out, got movement in the tree line. Looks like they're bringing up their reserve force. Good, Jack replied. About time they committed everything. Marcus, you know what to do. The sniper's rifle began its deadly work, not killing, but methodically disabling vehicles, weapons, and equipment. Each shot was calculated to reduce the cartel's options, to force them into predictable responses. They're pulling back, Keith reported, regrouping around their command vehicle. Jack checked his ammunition, noting the fires still burning across his property. The ranch was damaged, but not destroyed. His team was tired, but not beaten, and El Fantasma had just made his biggest mistake, consolidating his forces into one location. All units, Jack commanded, prepare for the final phase. Remember, we're not just defending anymore. Time to show them why you don't bring a cartel to a Delta Force fight. The night was about to get much worse for El Fantasma and his men. They thought they were winning by forcing Jack's team to fall back. Instead, they were walking right into the trap he'd been setting up since the beginning. Jack watched El Fantasma's forces consolidate around their command vehicle exactly where he wanted them. The cartel boss thought he was being smart, concentrating his remaining strength. Instead, he just put all his assets in one kill zone. All units, execute Phoenix Protocol, Jack commanded. His team's acknowledgements came in quick succession. They'd drilled this scenario countless times in their active duty days. Stand by for some fireworks, Ray announced. Those charges we didn't use earlier. They're about to earn their keep. Target area mapped. Marcus's voice was cold and professional. I've got clean shots on their command and control elements. Remember, Jack reminded them, we want survivors. They need to carry our message back. The counterattack began with surgical precision. Ray's charges detonated in sequence, not to kill, but to isolate. Walls of fire and smoke cut off escape routes, channeling the cartel forces exactly where Jack wanted them. What are they doing? El Fantasma demanded, watching his carefully positioned men suddenly trapped in overlapping fields of fire. Teaching you about real combat, Jack replied over their channel. Pay attention. This is how professionals work. Marcus's rifle spoke first, taking out their communications array with 3 precise shots. Next went their vehicle engines, each disabled with methodical efficiency. The cartel forces were now deaf, blind, and immobile. Do you think this changes anything? El Fantasma shouted, but his voice carried an edge of panic. I have more men, more resources. Not anymore, Jack replied as Keith's electronic warfare suite kicked in, flooding their frequencies with static. Right now, your reinforcements are being intercepted by state police. Amazing what happens when someone provides actionable intelligence about cartel movements. The cartel boss's response was predictable. ordering his men to attack in all directions. But Jack's team had trained for exactly this scenario. They moved like ghosts through the smoke and chaos, appearing and disappearing at will. "Contact front!" a cartel soldier screamed, firing at shadows. Jack was already gone, his strikes precise and devastating. 3 more went down before they realized where he was, and by then he'd moved again. "They're not human," another soldier cried out in Spanish. "They're everywhere." "Keep fighting," El Fantasma commanded, but his authority was crumbling. His men were experienced soldiers, but they'd never faced anything like this, an enemy that seemed to materialize from nowhere, strike without warning, and vanish before they could respond. "Sir," Keith reported, "they're breaking formation. The east sector is starting to run." "Heard them," Jack ordered. "Marcus, discourage any heroes." The sniper rifle cracked methodically, rounds impacting at the feet of anyone trying to flee. The message was clear: stay put or get worse. "You're trapped in here with us," Jack broadcast to the cartel forces. "But we're not trapped here with you. We are the trap." Ray's next series of charges demonstrated this perfectly. Careful detonations split the cartel's remaining forces into isolated pockets, each one cut off from support and exposed to precise fire from multiple angles. "Western Group is surrendering," Keith reported. "Eastern Group is, wait, movement by the command vehicle. El Fantasma is making a break for it." "Let him run," Jack replied, "right to where we want him." The cartel boss had grabbed 2 of his best remaining men, using the chaos to slip away from the main fight. He moved well. Clearly he hadn't always been just a commander, but Jack had planned for this too. El Fantasma's escape route led him straight into a prepared position. One moment he was running, the next he was face to face with Jack himself. "Impressive operation you had here," Jack said conversationally, his rifle trained center mass. "Good men, good equipment, solid tactics, but you made one critical mistake." "And what's that?" El Fantasma snarled, his hand inching toward a concealed weapon. "You thought fear only worked one way." Jack's voice carried decades of combat experience. "You're used to being the one people fear. Tonight, you learn what real fear feels like." The cartel boss moved fast, drawing his pistol in a practiced motion, but Jack was faster. One precise shot knocked the weapon away, another dropped El Fantasma's remaining guards. "You know what the difference is between your men and mine?" Jack asked, advancing as El Fantasma scrambled backward. "Training? Experience? No, purpose. You fight for money. We fought for something more." Around them, the battle was ending. Most of the cartel forces had surrendered, realizing the futility of their position. Those still fighting were being systematically isolated and neutralized. "Do you know why they called me Wraith?" Jack asked, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Not because I was hard to find, because by the time you did find me, it was already too late." El Fantasma made his final mistake, reaching for a backup weapon. Jack's response was instantaneous and precise. The cartel boss collapsed, clutching his shoulder, his face registering shock at how quickly it had happened. "Gather the survivors," Jack commanded his team. "I want them to hear this clearly." As his team rounded up the remaining cartel forces, Jack stood before them, his presence commanding absolute attention. These weren't just defeated soldiers, they were witnesses to something they'd never seen before. "You're alive because we chose precision over power," Jack announced. "You'll remain alive as long as you remember this lesson. This valley is protected, not by cops, not by guns, but by something far more dangerous. Men who've spent their lives learning how to fight smarter, not harder." Marcus's voice came over the comm. "Police forces approaching from the south. 10 minutes out." "Perfect timing," Jack replied. He turned back to the captured cartel forces. "You have a choice now. Stay and face American justice, or run back to your bosses. Either way, spread the word. The next cartel that tries to take this valley won't get the gentle treatment you got tonight." El Fantasma, still clutching his wounded shoulder, looked up at Jack, with a mixture of fear and respect. Who are you really? Jack smiled grimly. Just a rancher protecting his land. But before that, I was the ghost that haunted better men than you. Remember that the next time someone suggests moving into this territory. As police lights began to color the horizon, Jack's team prepared to fade away. They'd done what they came to do, not just defend a ranch, but send a message that would echo through cartel ranks for years to come. Dawn was breaking over the Arizona mountains, revealing the full extent of the night's battle. Burning vehicles dotted Jack's property, their smoke mixing with the morning mist. The 35 captured cartel members sat zip-tied in groups, watched over by Doc, while Ray and Marcus secured the perimeter. The fight was over, but the real work was just beginning. State Police ETA 3 minutes, Keith reported from his command post. FBI about 20 minutes behind them. They're very interested in our guests. Jack surveyed his ranch, calculating damages with a tactical eye. The barn was scorched but standing. Its reinforced structure had done its job. The house had taken heavy fire but remained structurally sound. His defensive positions, carefully built over years, had proven their worth. "Sir," Doc called out, kneeling beside El Fantasma. "He's stabilized, but he'll need a hospital eventually." The cartel boss looked up at Jack, his arrogance replaced by something closer to respect. "You could have killed us all." "Wasn't the point," Jack replied, checking. "The zip ties. Dead men don't carry messages. You're going to tell every cartel from here to Sinaloa what happened tonight." Police sirens echoed through the valley. Jack turned to his team. "Marcus, Ray, fade back. No need to complicate things with extra questions. Doc, you're our medic handling prisoners. Keith, wipe everything sensitive. I'll handle the locals." Sheriff Reynolds's convoy arrived first, 4 patrol cars and 2 tactical units. The sheriff stepped out, his face a mixture of shock and awe as he surveyed the battlefield. "Jesus Christ, Jack," Reynolds breathed. "When we got reports of explosions and gunfire, what happened here?" "Had some uninvited guests," Jack replied calmly. "They didn't take rejection well." Reynolds walked the perimeter, taking in the disabled vehicles, the captured cartel members, and precision damage to specific targets. This wasn't just a firefight. This was something else. "They came looking for an easy target," Jack explained. "Found something else instead. Your FBI friends will be interested in this bunch. They're part of the group that's been terrorizing the valley. And the ones we couldn't touch because we could never prove anything." Reynolds's eyes narrowed. "Looks like you proved plenty." Doc approached, his medical kit in hand. "Sheriff, got some wounded here that need attention. Nothing critical, but they should see a hospital." Reynolds keyed his radio, calling for ambulances. His deputies began processing the scene, their expressions a mix of professional duty and barely concealed amazement. Every cartel member was alive, injured in precise, non-lethal ways that spoke of extraordinary skill. "Your guests have been busy," Reynolds noted, examining ID cards and weapons. "Mexican Special Forces gear, high-end communications equipment, military-grade weapons. This is bigger than we thought." "Check the barn," Jack suggested. "Found some interesting paperwork. Might help with your other investigations." Keith had planted the intelligence carefully. Documents linking the cartel to local crimes, property, seizures, and accidents that had plagued the valley. Enough evidence to unravel their entire operation. El Fantasma watched the law enforcement activity with cold eyes. "This changes nothing. The cartel will do exactly what we tell them," Jack cut him off, "because if they don't, next time we won't be so gentle. Imagine what we could do if we actually wanted to kill people." FBI vehicles began arriving, serious-looking agents in tactical gear, evidence response teams, and senior investigators. Jack noted their approach patterns, their weapon handling. These weren't desk jockeys. They'd sent their A-team, Mr. Harrison, A female agent approached, her badge identifying her as Special Agent Lauren Martinez. "We're going to need a statement about what happened here." "Of course," Jack replied, "though it's pretty simple. They came to take my ranch. I defended my property." Martinez's eyes swept the battlefield with military precision. Multiple disabled vehicles, wounded suspects showing consistent non-lethal injury patterns, and enough evidence to take down their entire regional operation. "That's a night's work for one rancher. Grew up hunting," Jack shrugged. "Got lucky." "Lucky." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "We've been building a case against these people for months. Couldn't get near them. Then in one night, you not only defeat their entire assault force, but hand us actionable intelligence on a silver platter. Sometimes things just work out." The agent clearly didn't buy it, but she was professional enough not to push. "We'll need to process the scene. Forensics, photographs, witness statements. You understand?" "Take all the time you need," Jack replied. "Just watch the north field. Got some unstable ground there after all the excitement." Martinez nodded, recognizing the warning for what it was. Some evidence wouldn't be making it into official reports. Some questions were better left unasked. As law enforcement processed the scene, Jack's hidden team watched from concealed positions. They'd fought in places that didn't exist, conducted operations that would never see paperwork. This was no different. "Quite a mess you've made," Sheriff Reynolds said, rejoining Jack. "But I've got to ask, you sure this is the end of it?" Jack watched El Fantasma being loaded into an ambulance, surrounded by FBI agents. "They're businessmen, Sheriff. Tonight showed them that pushing into this valley is bad business. Very bad business. And if they're slow learners, then they'll find out why some old soldiers never really retire." A week after the battle, Shadow Valley began showing subtle signs of change. The Martinez Ranch, previously occupied by Cartel forces, was being surveyed by Marcus, his trained eyes seeing more than just abandoned buildings. Jack watched his old friend walking the property, marking sightlines and defensive positions with the same precision he'd once used in combat zones. "Ridge overlooks 3 major access roads," Marcus reported later that evening in Jack's rebuilt barn. "Clear views for 2 miles in every direction. Previous owners had to leave in a hurry, left file cabinets full of cartel documentation." Ray looked up from his blueprints of the valley. "County auctions next week. Most of these properties will go cheap. Cartel's shell companies are desperate to unload them." "Amazing what happens when criminals lose their nerve," Jack observed, studying the valley map they'd spread across his workbench. Red marks indicated former cartel properties, each one strategically valuable. Maria Suarez's truck appeared on the security cameras approaching Jack's ranch. They'd known this conversation was coming. She was too smart to keep buying the Lucky Rancher story forever. "Maintain cover," Jack ordered. His team dispersed smoothly, becoming simple farmhands and visiting friends as Maria pulled up. "Still, fixing bullet holes?" she called out, climbing down from her truck. Her eyes took in the repairs, noting the professional quality of the work. "Most of them," Jack replied. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." Inside, Maria studied Jack's face carefully. "Town meeting yesterday was interesting. Lots of properties coming up for auction. Some people are nervous about who might buy them." "Heard. Your brother's department cleared them all," Jack said, pouring coffee. "No more cartel presence." "That's not what worries them." Maria leaned forward. "Jack, I need to know what really happened here that night. And don't tell me it was just a lucky shooting." Jack considered his response. Maria had proven trustworthy, and in a small community, some truths couldn't stay hidden forever. "What do you think happened?" "I think," she said slowly, "that the cartel didn't just run into a rancher. I think they ran into someone who knew exactly how to fight them, someone with training experience." Through his window, Jack watched Marcus and Ray discussing property lines, their movements still carrying the unconscious precision of trained operators. "Sometimes people aren't what they seem. Sometimes that's a good thing." The others. Maria nodded toward the men outside. They're not just friends helping with repairs, are they? Does it matter? Maria's expression softened. The valley is changing, Jack. People feel safer, like something's watching over them, protecting them. Good land's worth protecting. A helicopter passed overhead, National Guard running surveillance on cartel movement near the border. But Jack knew they were really checking on something else. After the battle, certain agencies had taken a renewed interest in the valley's security. Agent Martinez stopped by the diner yesterday, Maria mentioned casually. That FBI agent. She was asking questions about you, about your background. Agent Martinez is good at her job, Jack acknowledged. She knows some stories are better left uninvestigated. Doc's truck pulled up, loaded with medical supplies. His cover as the valley's new doctor was already established. The old clinic needed someone younger, and his combat medical experience translated well to rural healthcare. More new people are moving in, Maria noted. That retired Army sniper bought the Wilson place, combat medic taking over Doc Peterson's clinic. Even heard rumors about a security consultant looking at the old radio station. Jack kept his expression neutral, but inwardly he smiled. His team was integrating perfectly, establishing their roles while maintaining tactical positions throughout the valley. Change isn't always bad, he said finally. Sometimes it's exactly what a place needs. A truck appeared on the road, Keith returning from installing communications equipment across the valley. In reality, he was creating a surveillance network that would make future threats think twice about moving in. You're building something here, Maria realized. Not just repairing damage. You're turning the whole valley into a community, Jack finished. One that can protect itself. The way you protected it that night? Sometimes the best protection is knowing you don't need to fight at all. Reputation can be stronger than bullets. Maria nodded slowly, understanding, dawning in her eyes. That's why you're letting people figure it out gradually. The rumors, the speculation, it's all part of it, isn't it? Smart woman. Marcus entered, his manner professional despite playing the role of a simple farmhand. Perimeter checks done, he said to Jack. Everything's quiet. Maria caught the slip, the instinctive sir that spoke of military discipline. Her expression showed not surprise, but confirmation of suspicions. Your secret's safe, she said quietly. Though I don't think it's much of a secret anymore. Not to the people who matter. Appreciate that. The valley's going to need people who understand discretion, people who can spot trouble before it arrives. Like I spotted that cartel scout last week? Maria's revelation caused both men to focus sharply on her. Don't worry. Ray handled it very professionally. Scout won't be reporting back to anyone. Jack exchanged looks with Marcus. They'd chosen correctly. Maria wasn't just observant. She was already part of the valley's new security network. Might be time we had a longer conversation, Jack suggested, about the valley's future, about how people like you, people who care about this land, can help protect it. Already having those conversations, Maria smiled. Why do you think I really came here today? Community's organizing, Jack. Thanks to you and your friends, we're learning to watch out for each other, to spot things that don't belong. Outside, the Arizona sun was setting behind the mountains that had watched over the valley for millennia. Those same mountains had witnessed the cartel's defeat, and now they would witness something new, the transformation of a vulnerable community into one that could defend itself. Times are changing, Jack acknowledged. Valleys changing with them. For the better, Maria assured him, thanks to some old soldiers who decided to keep fighting, just in a different way. As Maria drove away, Jack's team reassembled in the barn. Their cover identities were taking root, their positions throughout the valley nearly secured. Soon the transformation would be complete. She's sharp, Marcus observed. Could be useful. Already is, Jack replied. Valley's getting exactly what it needs: people who pay attention, who understand the importance of security. Speaking of security, Ray interjected, got some interesting plans for those other properties. Ways to make the whole valley an early warning system. Jack nodded, studying their map again. The cartel had chosen this valley for its strategic value. Now those same strategic features would serve a different purpose, protecting the community. They'd tried to destroy. The night settled over the ranch, peaceful in a way it hadn't been before the battle. Sometimes, Jack reflected, the best victories aren't the ones you win with violence, but the ones that prevent violence from ever returning. 2 weeks after the battle, Marcus stood at his newly acquired property, the former Wilson place, watching. Locals arrive for what they thought was just a shooting club meeting. The converted barn had become a state-of-the-art training facility, though most wouldn't recognize it as such. To them, it was just a place where an ex-military man taught firearms safety. Remember, Marcus addressed the gathered farmers and ranchers, accuracy before speed. Combat shooting's different from hunting. You need to be prepared for targets that shoot back, Jack observed from the sidelines, noting how naturally Marcus slipped advanced tactical training into basic shooting lessons. These weren't soldiers. They were training. They were community members learning to protect themselves, but the principles remained the same. Your property is your responsibility, Marcus continued. Knowing how to defend it isn't just about guns. It's about awareness, observation, and understanding your terrain. Maria was among the students, her natural aptitude showing. She'd already spotted 3 of the hidden observation posts Jack's team had established around the valley. More importantly, she'd kept that knowledge to herself. Across the valley, Doc's clinic had become operational, his combat medical experience translated perfectly to rural healthcare. But he was doing more than just treating patients. Each visitor was carefully evaluated, not just for medical issues, but for their potential as either ally or threat. Interesting morning, Doc reported later at Jack's ranch. Had a visitor. Claimed to be a traveling salesman, but his hands told a different story. Calluses consistent with weapons training. Cartel scout? Jack asked, checking security feeds. Probably. Gave him something to help with his headache. Minor sedative. Keith's tracking his movements now. Let's see where he reports back to. Ray emerged from his workshop where he'd been modifying farming equipment. To most eyes, they looked like normal tractors and harvesters. Few would notice the reinforced frames, the bulletproof glass, the hidden compartments. Finish the modifications on the Suarez place, Ray reported. Maria's barn could withstand a direct mortar hit now. Not that anyone would notice without looking real close. Jack nodded approvingly. The valley's transformation was proceeding, exactly as planned. Subtle changes that added up to an impregnable defensive network. Local sheriff's been asking questions, Keith called from his communication center, disguised as a ham radio enthusiast setup. Nothing aggressive, just curious about all the new people moving in. Let him be curious, Jack replied. Better. He thinks he's uncovering things on his own. Makes him feel involved. A truck approached. Bill Rodriguez, one of the local ranchers, looking troubled. Jack recognized the expression. More people were starting to notice changes in the valley, trying to make sense of them. "Jack!" Rodriguez called out, climbing down from his truck. "Got a minute? Something happened last night that, well, it's strange." Jack led him to the porch, where Shadow lay alert but relaxed. "What's on your mind?" "Had some visitors after dark. 3 vehicles didn't recognize them. They stopped at my gate. Looked like they were about to cause trouble." Rodriguez paused, collecting his thoughts. Then the strangest thing happened. Got a call from Marcus up at the old Wilson place. Said he was doing some night shooting practice and might get noisy. Next thing I know, shots ring out from somewhere in the hills. Visitors couldn't leave fast enough. Jack kept his expression neutral, but he knew exactly what had happened. Marcus had been on overwatch as usual. The visitors had likely been Cartel scouts testing the valley's new defenses. "Lots of strange things are happening lately," Rodriguez continued. "New people moving in, all of them military types. Security cameras going up on properties. Even Got folks talking about forming a community watch program. Times are changing, Jack observed. After what happened with the cartel, people are being more careful. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Thing is, Jack, it doesn't feel threatening. Feels organized, like someone's looking out for all of us. Communities coming together, Jack replied, carefully. Looking out for each other, that's all, but Rodriguez was sharper than most, gave him credit for. Maria Suarez says you're the one we should thank. Say what you did that night, standing up to the cartel. It changed things. Maria talks too much. Maria's usually right. Rodriguez straightened up. Listen, some of us have been talking. We want to help. Whatever you and your friends are doing to protect this valley, we want to be part of it. Jack studied the rancher carefully. Rodriguez had fought in Vietnam, though he rarely spoke of it. He'd know enough to recognize a military operation when he saw one. Might be we could use some extra eyes and ears, Jack acknowledged. People who know the land know what belongs and what doesn't. Already got a network started, Rodriguez revealed. Ranchers, farmers, even some of the town folks. We notice things, keeping track of strangers passing through and unusual activity. Figure that might be useful to whoever might need to know. Jack allowed himself a small smile. The valley's residents weren't just accepting protection. They were becoming active participants in their own defense. Stop by Marcus's place tomorrow, Jack suggested. He's running some special training sessions. Might be educational. Later, after Rodriguez left, Jack's team gathered to discuss this development. The valley's transformation was happening faster than expected, driven by the residents themselves. They're organizing on their own, Marcus noted approvingly, creating their own intelligence network. Better than we planned, Keith added. Local knowledge combined with our expertise. Valley's becoming a hard target without looking like one. Ray spread out his latest blueprints. Got requests from 3 more properties for structural improvements. They're figuring out what we can offer, even if they don't know exactly who we are. Think it's time we expanded the operation? Doc asked. More training, more preparation? Jack considered the question carefully. The valley's residents were proving themselves worthy of trust, eager to protect their community, but operational security remained crucial. We expand carefully, he decided. Keep everything compartmentalized. Let them think they're just being good neighbors, watching out for each other. The less they know about our full capabilities, the better. The team nodded in agreement. They'd fought wars in foreign lands, conducted operations in the world's darkest corners. Now they were fighting a different kind of battle, transforming an entire community into something uniquely defensible while maintaining the appearance of normal rural life. One more thing, Keith reported. Intercepted some cartel communications, words spreading about this valley. They're calling it El Valle de los Fantasmas, the Valley of Ghosts. Say it's cursed, protected by spirits that hunt cartel members. Jack smiled grimly. Sometimes the best defense wasn't just physical preparation, but reputation. Let them believe. In ghosts, the reality, highly trained operators, hidden among simple ranchers, was far more dangerous than any supernatural threat. The first test of the valley's new defenses came on a quiet Tuesday evening. Bill Rodriguez's grandson, Tommy, was the first to spot them. 3 unmarked SUVs moving slowly along the back roads, stopping occasionally to photograph properties. The 16-year-old did exactly what Marcus had trained him to do. Nothing obvious, just continued mending fences while using his phone to send a predetermined text message. Within minutes, the valley's warning network activated. Farmers found reasons to be in their fields, checking irrigation systems while noting vehicle descriptions and occupant numbers. Maria coincidentally drove past in her truck, her dashcam capturing license plates. Every movement was casual, natural, nothing to alert the observers that they'd been compromised. 4 men in the lead vehicle, Keith reported from his command center, monitoring the civilian reports flooding in. armed, trying to hide it. Second vehicle has camera equipment, thirds hanging back, probable security detail. Jack watched the security feeds, impressed by the community's response. No one was playing hero, no one was confronting the intruders. They were gathering intelligence, exactly as trained. Got confirmation, Doc called in. Matched two of them to Cartel medical records, low-level enforcers from the Tijuana operation. They're testing our defenses, seeing if the stories are true. Marcus's rifle at your 3 o'clock, Jack said into his radio, watching the Cartel scouts through his optics. Want me to take a shot? Not yet, Jack replied. Let's see how our neighbors handle this. The SUVs turned down a side road, approaching one of the formerly Cartel-owned properties. They were meeting the valley's first prepared response, though they wouldn't recognize it as such. Bill Rodriguez and 3 other ranchers were there, seemingly having a casual conversation by their trucks. Their positioning was perfect, blocking the road without appearing to, creating a natural choke point. Afternoon, Rodriguez called out, as the SUV stopped. You folks look lost. The lead vehicle's window rolled down, revealing a man trying hard to look like a tourist. Just admiring the properties. Beautiful valley you have here. Sure is, Rodriguez agreed amiably. Shame about all the problems, though. The Cartel scout tried to hide his interest. Problems? Oh yeah, government testing ground back in the 80s. Soil's all contaminated. Can't grow anything safely. That's why properties are so cheap. Can't farm them, can't sell them. Jack smiled at the cover story they'd prepared. Ray had even planted fake warning signs, partially hidden by overgrowth, just visible enough to be discovered by nosy visitors. The Cartel scouts exchanged uncertain looks. Their intelligence hadn't mentioned this. Behind them, Maria pulled up in her truck, blocking their retreat without seeming to. Whole valleys under EPA supervision, she added helpfully. Had some nasty incidents last year. 3-headed calf, mutated crops, had to burn everything. The scouts' discomfort was visible now. They'd come looking for signs of military presence, prepared for armed resistance. Instead, they were facing friendly locals and an environmental hazard story that would make the land worthless for cartel operations. Think we took a wrong turn, the lead scout said quickly. Thanks for the warning. As they passed Maria's truck, she gave them a friendly wave, snapping crystal-clear photos with her hidden camera. Little too much with the 3-headed calf, Jack commented over the radio. Got them moving, didn't it? Maria replied cheerfully. The community watched the SUVs leave, maintaining their casual poses while tracking every movement. The scouts never realized they'd triggered motion sensors, cameras, and a full tactical response team hidden in the tree line. Later that evening, Jack's team gathered to review the incident. The civilians had performed perfectly, showing none of their training while executing a coordinated intelligence-gathering operation. Environmental contamination story was clever, Marcus noted. Hard to verify, perfect excuse for cheap land. No cartel is going to risk toxic soil for their operations. Rodriguez's group handled the interdiction well, Keith added. Natural blocking positions, multiple angles of observation. They're learning. Ray pulled up the surveillance footage. Facial recognition confirmed all 6 cartel members. They're transportation specialists and usually scout new smuggling routes. Betting they write this valley off completely. Best part is they think they found the answer themselves, Doc observed. No signs of military presence, no obvious security, just locals warning them about bad land. Jack studied the footage, proud of how far the community had come in just a few weeks. They'd transformed from victims into a coordinated defense network. The cartel scouts had expected to find either an unprotected valley or obvious military presence. Instead, they'd found something much more effective, a prepared community that didn't appear prepared at all. Think they'll try again? Maria asked, joining them after ensuring she wasn't followed. Different groups probably will, Jack replied, but each time they'll find something that makes the valley unattractive. Environmental issues, zoning problems, archaeological sites that prevent development, Better to have them leave convinced the land is worthless than suspicious it's defended. Speaking of defending, Marcus interjected, Rodriguez's boy showed real promise today, spotted their tail car when it split off, kept eyes on it without being obvious. Might be worth bringing him into the advanced training group. The Valley was evolving faster than they'd planned, developing layers of defense that went beyond simple security. They weren't just training people to protect themselves, they were creating a community that could identify threats, gather intelligence, and respond appropriately without ever appearing militant. Got something else, Keith reported, checking his monitors. Cartel chatter picked up after our visitors left. They're spreading the contamination story, adding their own details. Two claiming their men got sick just driving through the valley. Stories growing legs? Perfect, Jack nodded. Let them build our cover for us. Every wild story makes them less likely to look closer at what's really here. Maria studied the tactical display, showing the day's operation in detail. You know, when you first started training us, I thought it was just about protecting ourselves. But this is different, isn't it? We're not just defending the valley, we're making it invisible to the wrong kind of attention. Best defense isn't always a fence or a gun, Jack explained. Sometimes it's convincing people there's nothing worth taking, nothing worth investigating. The team dispersed to their positions, maintaining the constant vigilance that had become routine. The valley's transformation was progressing exactly as planned, not into an armed camp, but into something far more sophisticated, a community that could defend itself while appearing completely innocuous. One thing's certain, Docky remarked as they watched the sunset. No one's going to look at this valley the same way again, not after today. Jack nodded, knowing the real victory wasn't in driving off the scouts, but in how naturally the community had responded. They weren't soldiers, would never be soldiers, but they'd become something just as effective. Citizens who knew how to protect their home without ever appearing threatening. The valley had faced its first test and passed with flying colors. The next test would be harder, but they'd be ready. After all, the best defenses are the ones your enemies never realize they're facing. Word of the valley's resistance spread through criminal networks like wildfire, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of tales of armed confrontation, the stories focused on mysterious illnesses, contaminated land, and inexplicable equipment failures. Each telling grew more elaborate, creating a mythology that served Jack's team better than any direct action could have. Latest rumor says 3 cartel scouts went blind just driving through, Keith reported during their morning briefing. Another claims crops planted with stolen money wither and die. My favorite is the one about ghostly soldiers appearing in thermal scopes. Marcus cleaned his rifle, smiling slightly. Amazing what happens when you let people's imaginations do the work for you. But not all attention was supernatural. Sheriff Reynolds arrived at Jack's ranch, his expression troubled. The local law enforcement had been supportive, but distant until now. Understanding some questions were better left unasked. Got some folks from the DEA asking questions, Reynolds said without preamble. They're curious why every criminal organization in the region suddenly decided our valley's radioactive. Heard some environmental stories going around, Jack continued. Repairing his tractor, maintaining his rancher's persona. Bad soil or something, Reynolds sighed. I've been in law enforcement for 30 years. I know a coordinated defense operation when I see one. Just like I know those hunting accidents that keep happening to cartel scouts aren't accidents. Sounds complicated, Jack replied mildly. Must keep you busy. That's just it. It doesn't, Reynolds said. Valley's gone from a major crime, problem to practically nothing. No drugs, no violence, no organized crime. It's like someone dropped a blank spot on the map. Shadow padded over, greeting Reynolds with a friendly but watchful attitude. The sheriff scratched the dog's ears, choosing his next words carefully. DEA's not the only ones interested. FBI's got analysts trying to figure out why this valley suddenly became invisible to criminal activity. they're finding things that don't add up, such as new residents with very convenient backgrounds, communication equipment that's a bit too sophisticated for ranchers, training programs that look a lot like military counterinsurgency tactics. Jack set down his wrench, finally giving Reynolds his full attention. Sounds like they're overthinking things. Sometimes a community just decides to protect itself by implementing professional-grade surveillance, by running coordinated responses to threats, by spreading disinformation that would make intelligence agencies proud. Before Jack could respond, Maria's truck roared up the drive. Her arrival wasn't a coincidence. She monitored all approaches to Jack's ranch, providing early warning of official visitors. "Sheriff!" she called out cheerfully. "Here for the Community Watch meeting?" Reynolds turned, surprised. "Community Watch?" "Oh, yes," Maria continued smoothly. "Jack's been helping us organize, teaching basic security awareness and emergency response, that sort of thing. After all that cartel trouble, people wanted to be more prepared." It was a perfect cover story, technically true, while revealing nothing about the full scope of their operations. Maria had learned well. "That's right," Jack added. "Amazing what ranchers can do when they work together, share information, and watch out for each other. Nothing complicated about it." Reynolds looked between them, understanding the message. The valley's transformation could be explained through official channels without revealing its true nature. "Community Watch Program," he mused. That would explain a lot to folks asking questions, especially if it was properly documented, had regular meetings, and kept records. "Probably should," Jack agreed. "Might even be good to have law enforcement oversight. Keep everything official." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Maybe I could help with that. Better to have everything above board, properly recorded. Could even get some state funding for training programs." Maria beamed. "That's a wonderful idea. We should schedule a proper meeting, get everyone involved." After Reynolds left, Jack's team emerged from their positions. They'd been watching the entire conversation, ready to respond if needed. "Smooth," Marcus commented. "Give them an official story that explains just enough." "Sheriff's sharper than he lets on," Doc observed. "He's offering to help maintain our cover." Jack studied the valley through his window. The community's transformation had reached a critical point, too effective to hide completely, too important to expose fully. "We adapt," he decided. "Let them see what they need to see. Community Watch Program gives us legitimate cover for training, communications, surveillance." "What about the federal attention?" Ray asked. "Let them look," Jack replied. "They'll find exactly what we want them to find, a well-organized community protection program, nothing more." Keith's monitoring equipment chirped, drawing their attention. "Got movement on the northern border. 3 vehicles, similar pattern." "To last week's scouts, alert the network," Jack ordered. "Let's show the sheriff how a proper community watch program handles unwanted visitors." The response was immediate but subtle. Farmers found reasons to work in their fields, positions, offering clear observation of the approaching vehicles. The local hunting club, now trained by Marcus in advanced marksmanship, began a scheduled target practice session, the shots carrying clearly across the valley. "Contact team in position," Maria reported. She'd taken charge of coordinating the civilian response groups. Thompson setting up the road maintenance delay. Right on cue, a municipal truck began slow repair work on the main access road, naturally blocking the most direct route into the valley. The suspicious vehicles would be forced to detour past 3 different observation posts. "Remember, Jack, transmitted to the civilian network, we're just concerned citizens today. Notice everything, react to nothing." The valley's defensive network had evolved beyond simple security into something more sophisticated. A community that could identify, track, and deter threats while maintaining perfect deniability. Every action had a legitimate explanation. Every response could be officially documented. "You know," Doc said thoughtfully, watching the operation unfold, "we spent years in the shadows, conducting operations nobody could know about. Now we're hiding in plain sight, running a defense network that officially doesn't exist." "Best disguise is the truth," Jack replied, checking his ammunition. "We are helping the community protect itself. Everything else is just details they don't need to know." The sun climbed higher over the Arizona mountains, watching as ranchers went about their daily work while covertly monitoring potential threats. The valley had become something unique, not a military installation, not a civilian community, but a hybrid that combined the best aspects of both. And if federal agencies wanted to investigate, let them. They'd find nothing but a remarkably well-organized community watch program. The rest, like the ghostly soldiers in thermal scopes, would remain the subject of rumors and speculation. Sometimes, Jack reflected, the best defense isn't in what people see, but in what they think they see. The Community Watch program's first official meeting drew more attention than anyone expected. 2 FBI agents sat in the back of the town hall trying to look inconspicuous. A DEA analyst took notes near the front, and even the state police had sent an observer. Jack watched them all while maintaining his role as a simple rancher, helping organize his neighbors. "Basic security awareness," he explained to the gathered crowd. "Knowing who belongs in our valley and who doesn't, recognizing suspicious behavior. Nothing complicated." Marcus, playing his part as the retired Army sniper running the local shooting club, outlined their civilian training program. Every word was carefully chosen to sound ordinary while conveying deeper meaning to those in the know. Proper radio. "Procedures are essential," he emphasized. "Clear communication can prevent misunderstandings." Maria managed the sign-up sheet, noting how the federal agents perked up at certain names. They were building profiles, trying to understand the valley's transformation from crime hotspot to impenetrable territory. "Movement at the north checkpoint," Keith's voice whispered in Jack's concealed earpiece. 2 SUVs, same pattern as the Tijuana group. Jack kept his expression neutral, continuing his presentation while the valley's real security network activated. Through the window, he watched farmers casually moving their equipment into blocking positions, creating natural barriers that would force the visitors to take predictable routes. "Community awareness means working together," Jack told his audience, every word carrying double meaning. Looking out for each other, being ready to respond to any situation. The FBI agents exchanged glances when 3 local trucks suddenly departed, driven by farmers who'd received the silent alert. To most observers, it looked like people leaving a boring meeting. In reality, they were moving to observation posts. "Got eyes on the vehicles," Maria reported quietly, having stepped outside to take a phone call. "Definitely a cartel, but a different group. Colombian markings." Jack continued his presentation, discussing routine neighborhood watch protocols while his team coordinated a complex defensive operation. The timing wasn't coincidental. Someone had deliberately scheduled this surveillance during their public meeting. "Remember," he told the crowd, "success depends on everyone doing their part. No heroes, no lone wolves. We work as a team." The DEA analyst was scribbling furiously, probably noting how military the phrasing sounded. Let him analyze. Everything they were doing was perfectly legal, just unusually well organized. "Vehicles approaching Main Street," Marcus murmured into the radio. "Running facial recognition now." The meeting continued, a perfect cover for the real operation happening outside. Jack discussed emergency response procedures while monitoring his team's deployment. Every word of his presentation could be quoted in official reports, while serving as actual tactical instructions. "When confronting suspicious activity," he explained, "the goal is to observe and report. Leave intervention to proper authorities." Right on cue, Sheriff Reynolds's deputies appeared, conducting a routine patrol that just happened to intercept the Colombian vehicles. The cartel scouts found themselves politely but firmly escorted out of the valley, their presence noted and logged through official channels. Coordination with law enforcement is crucial, Jack emphasized to his audience. The FBI agents nodded approvingly, unaware they were watching a live demonstration of exactly how that coordination worked. After the meeting, Reynolds approached Jack, his expression carefully neutral. Interesting timing with those Colombian visitors. Timing's everything, Jack agreed quietly, especially when you're explaining to federal observers how a legitimate community watch program operates. They bought it, Reynolds confirmed. Perfect blend of civilian organization and law enforcement cooperation. Almost too perfect. Sometimes the best way to hide something is to show people exactly what they expect to see. The sheriff nodded. Thoughtfully, DEA's theory is that we've got an official Black Ops team deployed here. The FBI thinks we're running a sanctioned intelligence operation. Nobody suspects we've just got farmers who are really good at working together. Amazing what people can accomplish with proper motivation and organization. As the federal observers departed, Jack's team regrouped at his ranch. The operation had worked perfectly. Legitimate cover established, real security maintained, and potential threats deflected without raising suspicions. Colombian Cartel is trying to move in, Keith reported, checking his intelligence feeds. They think the Mexican cartel's retreat means the territory is open. Let them try, Marcus replied. Environmental hazard story works just as well in Spanish as it does in English. Maria arrived, having followed the federal agents to ensure they actually left the valley. They're convinced they figured it out. Think we're some kind of official. A program they're not clear about. Best cover story is the one your targets create for themselves, Jack noted. They'll look for complicated explanations and miss the simple truth. We're exactly what we appear to be, just better organized than they expect. Doc joined them, returning from his clinic. Heard something interesting today. Cartels offering bounties for real information about the valley, getting desperate to understand why they can't get a foothold here. Let them wonder, Jack replied. Mystery is more effective than force. They'll waste time looking for secrets that don't exist, while our real strength, community organization and preparation, stays hidden in plain sight. The sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. On the surface, nothing had changed. Farmers worked their land, ranchers tended their herds, life continued as normal. But beneath that peaceful exterior, an invisible network of surveillance, communication and coordination kept the community safe. You know, Maria observed, watching the last light fade. When you first started training us, I thought we were just learning to defend ourselves. But this is different, isn't it? We're not just protecting the valley, we're changing how people think about it. Jack nodded. The valley's transformation went beyond physical security. They'd created something unique, a community that could defend itself while appearing completely ordinary. The best defense wasn't in weapons or tactics, but in making the valley seem simultaneously worthless to criminals and boring to officials. Next phase starts tomorrow, he announced to his team. Expanding the training program, improving coordination. The federal attention means we need to be even more careful. Everything documented, everything legitimate. Hiding in plain sight, Marcus mused. Just like old times, but different. Never thought I'd be running a real operation disguised as a cover story disguised as a real operation. Sometimes, Jack replied, the best way to keep a secret is to make sure everyone thinks they already know it. The Colombian Cartel made their first serious probe on a quiet Sunday morning. Instead of obvious scouts or intimidation teams, they sent what appeared to be legitimate businessmen, 3 well-dressed individuals in a rental car carrying briefcases full of authentic-looking development proposals. Real estate developers, Maria reported from the diner where she'd casually overheard their conversation, claiming they want to build a resort complex. Very convincing cover. Jack watched through his security feeds as the developers made their way through the valley, meeting with property owners. Their approach was sophisticated, legitimate-looking contracts, promises of economic development, careful avoidance of any threatening behavior. They're learning, Marcus observed from his observation post. No weapons, no thugs, no obvious criminal connection, just business proposals that happen to be backed by cartel money. This required a different response than their usual tactics. Jack gathered his core team while the community network tracked the visitors' movements. They couldn't respond with intimidation or environmental hazard stories. This threat needed a more subtle approach. Time to activate the Historical Society gambit, Jack decided. Doc, you're up. Doc, who'd established himself as an amateur historian, alongside his medical practice, intercepted the developers at the local coffee shop. His enthusiasm for local history was well known and entirely genuine. "Oh, you're interested in development?" he exclaimed loudly, sliding into their booth uninvited. "Have you seen the archaeological surveys? This whole valley is a protected site. Native American burial grounds, historical battlefields. We've got more preservation orders than buildable land." The developers exchanged glances. This wasn't the resistance they'd expected. Instead of scared farmers or armed opposition, they faced an excited historian, pulling out maps and documentation. "Most folks don't know this," Doc continued cheerfully, "but the whole valley is under federal protection. Archaeological Resources Protection Act, National Historic Preservation Act. Can't build anything without years of surveys. Last developer spent 5 years just getting permits to add a garage." "Interesting," the lead developer said carefully. "Our research didn't show any historical significance." "Oh, that's because most of it's classified," Doc replied enthusiastically. "Military testing range during World War II, you know. Still finding unexploded ordnance. Had to call the bomb squad twice last month." Maria, playing her part perfectly, chose that moment to rush in. "Doc, they found another one in Thompson's Field. Need you to check if it's historical before they call the disposal team." The developer's interest visibly waned. Their careful plans for legitimate property acquisition were running into something worse than armed resistance, federal bureaucracy, and protected land status. "Might want to mention the Endangered Species Survey," Jack suggested through the radio. Doc seized the opportunity with relish. "And don't get me started on the spotted owls. Whole valley is a protected habitat. Environmental impact studies take years. Can't even trim a tree without federal approval." By the time Doc finished his enthusiastic explanation of environmental regulations, historical preservation requirements, and unexploded ordnance protocols, the developers were already making excuses to leave. Their legitimate approach had run straight into an impenetrable wall of bureaucratic complications. "They're pulling out," Marcus reported, "heading for the highway." "No need for a farewell message," Jack replied. "Let them go. They'll do our work for us, warning others about the regulatory nightmare." Later, the team gathered to review the operation's success. The Colombian cartel's attempt at legitimate acquisition had been thwarted not by force or threat, but by carefully crafted legal obstacles. "Beautiful setup," Ray commented. "Every document is genuine, every regulation real. They can check everything Doc told them and find it's all true." "That's the beauty of it," Keith added. "We didn't create the regulations, just made sure they apply here. No one can prove we're doing anything except following the law extremely thoroughly." Maria arrived with updates from her network of observers. Word's already spreading. 2 other development groups cancelled their visits. Seems no one wants to deal with our regulatory issues. "Better than guards or guns," Jack noted. "Can't fight City Hall, as they say. Or in this case, federal preservation orders. But their success brought new challenges. Sheriff Reynolds arrived looking concerned. Got some people from the State Historical Society asking questions. Seems someone's been filing a lot of preservation requests lately. Natural interest in local history, Jack replied mildly. Amazing what you find when you start looking, Reynolds sighed. Jack, in the past month, we've had environmental protection orders, historical preservation requests, endangered species surveys, and archaeological studies. Starting to feel like this valley is wrapped in more red tape than the Pentagon. Good fences make good neighbors, Jack smiled. Sometimes those fences are made of paperwork. The sheriff studied him for a moment. You know, when you first started organizing the community watch, I thought you were just teaching basic security. But this is something else. You're not just protecting the valley, you're making it impossible to take over. Everyone has their skills, Jack acknowledged. Some folks are good at spotting trouble. Others know their way around federal regulations. Put it all together, you get a community that can protect itself without ever looking threatening. As dusk settled over the valley, Jack's team conducted their evening briefing. Their latest victory proved their evolving strategy was working. The criminal organizations were learning they couldn't take the valley by force, but their attempts at legitimate acquisition were being thwarted just as effectively. Got reports from 3 more cartels pulling back operations, Keith said, checking his surveillance data. Our reputation's spreading. Even the legitimate criminal front companies are staying away. Smart money runs from red tape, Ray noted. No one wants to fight a war against paperwork. Maria joined them, bringing coffee and news from town. Overheard some interesting chatter at the diner. Seems the stories about the valley are getting wilder. Now they're saying anyone who tries to bring drugs through here disappears without a trace. Best defense is the one in people's minds, Jack said. Let them create their own reasons to stay away. Meanwhile, we keep building something they'll never understand. A community that protects itself by being exactly what it appears to be, just better organized than anyone expects. The Arizona night settled over the valley, stars emerging in the clear desert sky. On the surface, life continued as normal. Ranchers tended their herds, farmers worked their fields, and the community went about its business. But beneath that ordinary facade lay something extraordinary. A defense system built not on weapons or walls, but on reputation, organization, and the power of letting others see exactly what they expect to see. 6 months after the battle that changed everything, Jack stood on his front porch watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky. The scars of that night had faded. Bullet holes patched, burned vehicles removed, damaged buildings repaired. But the valley itself had been transformed in ways that went far deeper than physical repairs. Interesting report from our friends. Down south, Keith said, joining him with fresh coffee. 3 different cartels tried setting up operations in neighboring counties this month. All of them suddenly pulled out when they realized how close they were to our valley. Jack smiled, slightly. Reputation's a powerful thing. Better than any wall we could build, Marcus added, emerging from the barn where he'd been conducting another civilian firearms safety class. Got 20 new students today. Every one of them is already showing the right instincts. The valley had become something unique in the borderlands, a place that criminal organizations actively avoided without ever fully understanding why. The stories had taken on a life of their own. Some said the land was cursed, others claimed government. Experiments had made it uninhabitable. A few even whispered about ghost soldiers who appeared and disappeared like desert mirages. Latest rumors, my favorite, Maria called out, pulling up in her truck. Apparently we've got invisible drones and satellite coverage. Cartel scout swears he saw his own infrared signature on his thermal scope. That would have been Ray testing. Those modified irrigation sprinklers, Doc chuckled. Amazing what a little heated water mist does to thermal imaging. The reality was both simpler and more sophisticated than any of the rumors. Every ranch had become a sensor node. Every business A collection point, every routine activity part of an interlocking defensive network. But it was all hidden beneath the appearance of normal small-town life. Sheriff Reynolds called, Keith reported. DEA's officially designated our valley as a low-priority surveillance zone. Apparently we're too boring to waste resources on. FBI's. The same, Maria added. Agent Martinez told me over coffee that they've classified us as a self-regulating community model, whatever that means. It means we've done our job, Jack replied. They've all found exactly what they expected to find. Nothing more interesting than an unusually well-organized rural community. The transformation had been comprehensive. Doc's clinic had become a regional medical training center, giving him legitimate reason to stock advanced trauma supplies. Marcus's shooting range was now officially recognized for law enforcement certification, explaining the military-grade training taking place there. Ray's construction company handled specialized renovations throughout the valley, carefully hiding defensive improvements behind ordinary repairs. Got the quarterly intelligence summary, Keith said, checking his tablet. 6 different criminal organizations have declared our valley off-limits to their operations. 3 more are actively spreading stories about the dangers of coming here. Best part? Each group thinks they know the real reason why, and every single one is wrong. Jack watched a Border Patrol helicopter pass overhead. They'd developed a unique relationship with law enforcement, not quite allies, but not adversaries either. The authorities had come to appreciate having a peaceful sector that largely policed itself, even if they didn't quite understand how. It worked. Thompson's boy spotted something interesting yesterday, Maria reported. Cartel scout team, watching the valley from the old fire lookout. They spent 3 days observing, took detailed notes, then left without ever entering. Their report declared the whole area strategically worthless due to environmental hazards and excessive federal oversight. Perfect, Jack nodded. That's exactly what we want. Let them convince themselves it's not worth the trouble. The weekly community council meeting was starting soon. What had begun as a cover for their security operations had evolved into something genuine. A forum where the valley's residents could coordinate their defensive efforts while maintaining the appearance of ordinary civic engagement. Remember when we thought we'd just be teaching basic security? Doc mused as they walked toward the in-town hall. Now we've got grandmothers running counterintelligence and farmers doing thermal scanning during their morning rounds. They've learned well, Marcus said proudly. Yesterday I watched old Bill Rodriguez's grandson coordinate a 5-point surveillance operation, using nothing but routine farm work as cover. Kids have a natural talent for it. The town hall was filling up as they arrived. To any outside observer, it looked like a typical rural community meeting. Only those who knew what to look for would notice the precise positioning of participants, the subtle communication networks, the carefully maintained lines of sight. Got movement on the South Ridge, Keith whispered, checking his phone. 3 vehicles match cartel patterns. Let's show them how a proper community handles visitors, Jack replied calmly. The response was immediate but invisible. Farmers found reasons to move equipment to strategic positions. The local construction crew just happened to start roadwork on the main approach. A dozen casual observers began documenting vehicle descriptions and occupant details while appearing to go about their normal business. They're already turning around, Maria reported 10 minutes later. Didn't even make it past the outer markers. Guess they didn't like how many people just happened to notice them. This was their true victory, not the battle months ago, but what they'd built since then. A defensive system so natural, so organic, that it didn't look like a defense at all. Just a community where people watched out for each other, where suspicious activity was noticed and responded to without any visible response. Got the latest recruitment numbers, Doc said quietly during the meeting. 15 more families are moving into the valley next month, all vetted, all with useful skills. 3 former military, 2 ex-law enforcement, 1 communications expert. The valley was growing, but carefully. Each new resident was chosen not just for their abilities, but for their understanding of what they were becoming part of. The community's strength wasn't in weapons or tactics, but in its unity of purpose. Sometimes, I wonder what those cartel boys would think, Marcus mused later that evening, if they knew the truth, that their biggest obstacle isn't some ghost force or government operation, but just ordinary people who learn to work together. They'd never believe it, Jack replied. That's our best defense. The truth is too simple for them to see. The night settled over the valley, stars emerging in the clear desert sky. On the surface, nothing had changed from 6 months ago. The same farms, the same ranches, the same small-town routines. But beneath that peaceful exterior lay something unique. A community that had learned to defend itself not through force of arms, but through unity, awareness, and the power of letting others see exactly what they expected to see. "You know what the real victory is?" Maria asked, watching the last light fade. "Not just that we stopped them, but that we'll never have to fight that battle again. We've built something that will last." Jack nodded, thinking of all the layers they'd created. The official cover stories that were true enough to verify, the capabilities hidden beneath ordinary activities. The reputation grew stronger with every failed attempt to penetrate their defenses. "The valley protects its own now," he said quietly. "Not because of what we taught them, but because they learned to protect themselves." In the distance, another cartel scout vehicle approached the valley's edge. Like dozens before it, it would observe, report, and ultimately decide this territory wasn't worth the trouble. The ghost stories would grow, the rumors would spread, and the valley would remain secure, not through violence or confrontation, but through the power of letting others convince themselves to stay away. Jack smiled slightly, watching the vehicle turn around before even entering the valley proper. Sometimes the best victories were the ones where no shots were fired, no battles fought. Sometimes the strongest defense was simply becoming something your enemies couldn't understand, and therefore couldn't defeat. The ghost of the borderlands had done his job, not by fighting, but by teaching others to protect themselves in ways that would outlast any single battle or defender. The valley had become its own fortress, invisible to those who sought to harm it, sustainable for generations to come, and that Jack knew was the greatest victory of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.